Now, Executive Suites with WPRI.com reporter Ted Nisi.
Welcome to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nisi. Good to have you with us this week. Now, later on in the show, we're going to talk to two executives from the Cherrystone Angel Group, angel investor group in Providence you may have heard of, more than 10 years old now. We're going to hear about some of the work they do. But of course, we have to start this week with the biggest business news of the week, which is the sale of the Pawtucket Red Sox and the potential move of the team to a new stadium, if they can get it built, in Providence. And joining me, two men who know quite a bit about this, the sports editor of the Providence Journal, Mike McDermott, and my colleague, Dan McGowan from WPRI.com. Dan, Mike, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
So, gentlemen, I want to start by getting people situated in their minds of where we're talking about with this potential Providence ballpark. We have a map that I think we can bring up to show you at home where it is. Dan, as that map gets brought up, you see it there. What are we looking at? Where is this spot they want to put it?
So just imagine you're driving down Dorrance Street in Providence, away from City Hall. You would essentially hit it as Dorrance Street kind of runs out, and it would be alongside the Providence River. Currently, right there is the Brown Professional Studies Building. And you know, it's part of that 195 land. It's part of what was designated for park area as a part of the 195
Just an open
land.
park.
Just an open park, yeah. It's part of a law that's written into the 195 land law.
Okay, so we actually talked, Tim White and I, this morning with Jim Skeffington, who's the new president of the PawSox, on Newsmakers. He talked about this site and why they want it. Let's listen to what Skeffington had to say.
You know, have we considered other sites? Yes, we have. There is no plan B. We're laser focused on this particular site and see if it's a site on which we could build an exciting ballpark. It has all the attributes that we think are important, and we think that'll help not only our team but the Providence and the state of Rhode Island.
Years in Rhode Island politics, Jim Skeffington, and still making headlines, that's for sure. And that interview you can catch on air on WPRI.com on Newsmakers. So, Mike, of course, Jim Skeffington, just one of 10 investors who joined this group that bought the PawSox, including among them his principal co-owner, Larry Lucchino, the Boston Red Sox CEO, and Fenway Sports Group, which is the John Henry group that owns the Red Sox. Why did the Red Sox want to be involved in this, to buy the team?
Well, the Red Sox have had things very good for a long time with the PawSox. They have an affiliate in AAA. It's right down the road, really. Ben Cherington, the general manager, said this week that if he wants a player to play at Fenway that night, he can make a call at 2:30 and the guy could be at the ballpark at 7 o'clock. They really wanted to preserve that relationship, have a ownership in place that was close to them, and that wasn't going to move the team out of the region. And so when they found out that there was going to be a sale of the team a couple of years ago, the Red Sox wanted to get involved, and I think a lot of it was just to preserve stability and control over the relationship that they've had, which has worked very well for them for a number of years now.
Now, had there been, of course, Ben Mondor, who famously saved the PawSox, he passed away in 2010. His wife, Madeline, owned it with the other executives there at the PawSox. Was it clear that the team would probably be sold for a while now? What was sort of the suspense in the sports world about this?
Well, Larry Lucchino said to our Tim Britton down in Fort Myers this week that it began about 2 years ago, that it became clear in their conversations with Madeline Mondor that she was looking to sell the team soon, and that was the point at which the Red Sox wanted to get involved. I think obviously McCoy Stadium has worked out very well from a fan's perspective, but the business model there has not been a growing business model. Since 2006, ticket sales are down about 20%, and I think when new owners come in, they look for ways to obviously to buttress the business, and I think they just obviously have been studying this for a while and have come to the conclusion that McCoy is not where the long-term growth is going to come from.
Now that's what they think, but I know in the baseball world, not everyone is happy to be hearing about the leaving of McCoy, a pretty well-known place, right?
Right, and you know, honestly, as a baseball fan, I'll go to McCoy Stadium a few times a year for the rest of my life. I have no problem with it. I think, you know, there might be a little bit. It's amazing in a way that it's lasted as long as it has. It goes back to 1942. There's nothing else in AAA that's even close to that. The closest is Tacoma, which is 1959. Everything else is 1990s or later. And most of these places are increasingly moving into downtown type urban locations. And so I think right now they're not looking at just the guy who's going to go to see the baseball players. They're looking at somebody who's going for an experience. And I think they're just finding that they're not going to. It's going to be hard to pull that off in Pawtucket.
So McCoy clearly an outlier in its age then compared to the other stadiums right now.
Yeah, even though it was renovated extensively just about 15 years ago.
Ironically, you and I ran into each other at McCoy just last year,
right.
So it brings Rhode Islanders together still. Dan, you wrote a story for us on PRI.com this week about, you talked to Skeffington, you looked at some of the other places this has been done. What is their vision for this stadium? As Mike points out, a lot of them are younger. What kind of younger stadiums are they looking at?
Yeah, so, and as Mike said, also one of the big keys is having an urban area, sort of a downtown, the kind of 4 or 5 places that they're really looking at. Charlotte, North Carolina, El Paso, Texas, Toledo, Ohio, and Durham, North Carolina. And Durham, North Carolina is very interesting because, remember, Duke University's there, and that's the city's largest employer. I think that's one of those areas that, with a great medical school, great reputation down there, that's the one that they want to sell to the public here. That Brown has this great medical center coming in, or the nursing center with URI and Rick, and so the idea is that if we want to recruit young employees, for those mid-level, mid to high-range level paying jobs, this is one attractive way of doing it. We've got a great field downtown, great restaurants, things like that. I think that's the sell from the PawSox.
Is there any chance, from what we're hearing, do you think that they stay at McCoy?
No, absolutely not. They've made it very clear. In fact, Mayor Grebian in Pawtucket, I talked to him on Monday morning, and he told me he thinks it's about a 5% chance, and even that was very, he said we have to fight for it, but he doesn't think it's going to happen.
Do you agree with that, Mike? Do you think McCoy it's over for McCoy with this new ownership group?
They've said it pretty clearly. It seems like they're determined to move, and like I said, they've had a couple of years to form this group, have them come together, do their feasibility, their studies, and I think this must be a conclusion that they've come to pretty firmly at this point.
We have to take a break in a sec, but what do you think will happen to McCoy before we keep talking about the stadium? I mean, that's a big old ballpark, a big facility there. Have you heard anything? Any ideas people are saying, Mike?
I haven't. I mean, of course, it's a cautionary tale. I suppose you're going to have this big empty shell, unfortunately, unless they find some other use for it. But a lot of the things that happen at McCoy off-season are probably now going to be marketed for this new Providence ballpark if it's built, concerts and things like that. So it's a question mark, and whenever you're going to build a new stadium or get involved in building a new stadium, you have to think about the empty stadiums that could get left behind someday.
Anything from Grebian on that?
Nothing on that yet. I mean, you could always see, imagine the PawSox.
To be clear to people, it's owned by the city of Pawtucket.
That's right, yeah. Well, imagine the PawSox go to Providence, and maybe the Pawtucket steals the Newport goals from Newport or something. Maybe we just have a lot of moving around.
It's a merry-go-round of sports teams in Rhode Island. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more with Dan and Mike about this proposal for a new stadium downtown Providence. Will it happen? We'll talk more about it on Executive Suite. Stick with us. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nisi. Later on in the show, we're going to talk to 2 executives from the Cherrystone Angel Group about their angel investing organization and access to capital issues and all that in Rhode Island. But right now, we're talking about the big business story of the week, the sale of the Pawtucket Red Sox. And joining me from WPRI.com, my colleague Dan McGowan, and the sports editor of the Providence Journal, Mike McDermott. They've been all over this at the Journal, and you want to check out their coverage as well as Dan. So, Dan, the timeline on this. I mean, when's this thing going to open if they get what they want, the new ownership group?
Sure. We've heard numerous times Jim Skeffington say he wants to open by the start of the 2017 season. That seems incredibly ambitious. 2018 seems maybe more likely, but I think he said on Newsmakers today, 2017 is the goal.
Do you think that's doable?
I'd be amazed if they opened the stadium in 2017, but interestingly, Larry Lucchino himself said he thought that was an ambitious timeline. It sounded to him like he wouldn't mind if it was 2018 or 2019, and obviously they're kind of locked into McCoy, or they have the lease in McCoy through 2021, so it's not a huge rush in that sense.
And they need, of course, public subsidies. They've been explicit with that. Dan, you were looking at that as you looked at the other ballparks. I mean, what kind of support are they going to need from the public? Are they going to be looking for in the political process to get that done, especially if they want to build that soon?
Sure. So there's a couple of different components there. On the at the State House, they're going to need a couple of different things, including lots of different legislative changes. These could end up being very minor changes. Things like they have to change. We talked about they want to build it on public was designated to be public parkland. That some type of law would have to change there. They need to get some sort of agreement from the state in terms of whether they're going to lease it back to the team and things like that. On the city side, there's one key component, what would likely be a tax stabilization agreement, some sort of deal that results in a tax break moving forward for the owners. Like I said, on the state side, it seems like the legislature is pretty bullish on doing this.
Especially the leaders.
The leaders definitely are. On the city side, I think that they're also excited about the prospect, but they will. They're very worried about tax stabilizations and any type of tax break in general, and so they'll probably do a lot of due diligence to make sure that they're getting the right.
Mike, no guarantees Providence gets this stadium, or even that they stay in Rhode Island, right? I mean, how much do you think is there already competition ramping up to try to woo them away? Like, don't build this Providence stadium at all, come somewhere else.
Well, we've heard nothing about that, but you're right, there's no guarantees. In fact, Skeffington has even said that they're not even sure that the park can physically be built at this location. It's really aspirational at this point, although they think it can be done. But we do know that this new ownership group is not going to want to move the team out of the region. But if Rhode Island doesn't work out, if Providence doesn't work out specifically, there are places that could hold this kind of a ballpark and fit the vision. Worcester could be an obvious example. It's close enough, very close to Boston. They could get somebody prospect into Fenway on short notice. And then an intriguing one to me has always been Patriot Place in Foxborough. It's not an urban area, but certainly there's land there available. And you've got Robert Kraft as somebody who could build a stadium for a minor league baseball team using his own money. So these are some things that are out there. But like I said, no indication that any of those talks have ever taken place.
Now, the general reaction, I assume that the Sox will have no problem with minor league baseball, with rules, with the league or anything like that to get all this approved?
Well, the sale's already been cleared by all those authorities, and I can't imagine. The only thing, Major League Baseball does have guidelines on the dimensions of the parks, so they're going to have enough land there to build a park up to the Major League regulations. So, but assuming that they can do that, I think that's the feasibility of the land is going to come into play there.
Dan, I mean, generally speaking, right now, does it look like this is going to happen or not? Too soon to say. I mean, what's the sense?
Yeah, I think it does. I think today, certainly, it looks like it very well could happen. So much of this, you and I have talked about this in the newsroom the last couple of days. So much of this is making sure is how they're going to spin the idea of public subsidy to the public, right? They're likely not going to be asking for a $75 million loan. That helps, right? We know we're not writing a check. That's a big deal. However, if they're going to be going into the city and asking for a tax break, if they're going to be asking the state to take some sort of control, they're going to have to really find a way to really sell this to the public to make people buy in. Today it seems pretty good, but who knows what, I hate to sound like a politician, but the devil's in the details, of course.
Yeah, and I was going to say a lot of the other parks have been built in recent years. In some of the cases where they haven't gone well, the taxpayers haven't necessarily gotten the full story about how much they were going to be on the hook for when these things were in the planning stages. And so, as far as the state's leaders are going to have to be level with the people in terms of what they're actually committing to here.
And up to the three of us and others to make sure that information comes out. All right,
Sure.
Dan McGowan, Mike McDermott from the Providence Journal, thank you both for joining me to break this down for viewers. But don't go away. Coming up next, we're going to talk with two leaders of the Cherrystone Angel Group about angel investing in Rhode Island. Stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi, and joining me now from the Cherrystone Angel Group, an angel investor group that's made news over the years, is the chairman, Robert Manning, and the executive director, Jennifer Schwall. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
So, Rob, I'm going to start with you. Can you give people at home, they might not know too much about angel investing and all this, what is the Cherrystone Angel Group? What do you do?
Cherrystone Angel Group is a group of about 70 individuals who are what are known as qualified investors, who get together in an organized way and invest in early stage companies.
So what makes them an investor who can get in, an accredited investor? You couldn't just sign up and join anybody, right?
You couldn't sign up and join anybody. There are qualifications that are defined by law, and they sort of set a minimum floor for wealth and income that you have to have, and these are defined by the federal government. And if you're over that threshold, then you're eligible basically to be a member.
So what's the difference, it might sound to folks like a venture capital firm, what's the difference between a group like Cherrystone and a classic venture capital firm?
Venture capital funds bring money in from limited partners, and then they have a very limited number of people who actually run the firm. Angel groups are run by the members themselves. So they do everything.
So can you give us a thumbnail, who are your members, whether, not necessarily names even, but just the type of people who've joined?
Our members tend to be successful entrepreneurs. They tend to be doctors, lawyers, bankers, scientists. We have a number of PhDs who are members who have been affiliated with firms that have successfully commercialized technologies. And we use these very diverse skill sets with the membership to help us evaluate investments, understand what looks good, understand what the chances of success for a particular venture are, and it's been a really tremendously successful model.
How long have you been involved?
I've been in Cherrystone for about 8.5 years.
Yeah, so most of the time it's been in existence then.
Oh, yeah.
Jennifer, I want to bring you into the conversation. The last time you did an update infographic, it mentioned nearly $16 million invested in companies since 2004. What's the focus when Cherrystone decides how to make those investments? What areas do you look at? What do you look for?
So we're typically looking at biopharma, medical device, consumer product a little bit, hardware and software. So that tends to be our domain expertise where we like to get involved. And it's typically a company that is past some of the early development and is really looking to raise money to scale into the market. So they validated with beta testers or they have initial prototypes and we're looking to launch that into the marketplace.
Now, are you out, scouting for companies? Are they coming to you applying? How does how does the relationship get created there?
So all of the above. So a lot of our members will refer deals. We're up in the Boston markets, New York markets, looking for opportunities as well as in Rhode Island. And a lot of the companies will just apply through the website. So they'll reach out, send in an application. Sometimes those are our best companies.
Really? So that could work? A company with a good idea just emails you out of the blue
Definitely.
and if you look at it?
Yeah, we always take a second look at Rhode Island deals specifically. But if they're a great fit, we can find them anywhere.
Now, Rob, I think the successful kind of individuals who've joined Cherrystone, they didn't get there on sentiment. So they might like to invest in Rhode Island companies, but they want to make sure that the companies are stable and that they'll get a good return and everything. How does the Rhode Island piece play into Cherrystone's mission and work?
Well, as Jennifer said, we will definitely take a second look at every Rhode Island company that comes through. Cherrystone invests across southern New England. Part of the reason for that is Massachusetts, the Boston area, is one of the principal areas in the world for the origination of pharma deals, medical device deals. There's so much good technology coming out up there. We partner on a regular basis with angel groups from Massachusetts to help provide financing for these companies. And there's a lot of quid pro quo that goes on.
Now, early on, perhaps your best known one was Narragansett beer. People recognize that, but as Jennifer alluded to, you've moved much more into the sort of biomedical device fields you're talking about. Could you give us an example of a company you've invested in that you're excited about?
Well, we invested fairly early on, about 2005 or 2006, in a company called Smart Cells, which developed a glucose-responsive insulin, basically a pancreas in a molecule. And that was highly successful, went through 4 rounds of fundraising, and was ultimately sold to Merck about 3 or 4 years ago for a tremendous return. And Merck is continuing to develop the drug, and it should be in the market in 3 or 4 years. We've invested in a company called Avaxia, which is developing a therapy for inflammatory bowel disease. We've got some device companies, one called Respiratory Motion. We had Boston Heart Therapeutics, which was a diagnostics company. That was just sold. In fact, it was a company out of Framingham. So these are some examples of some of the companies we've done.
And have you seen any trends now? You've been in there almost a decade now. You've been working with the group in the kinds of companies that come forward. What looks most promising, or is it just so based on each company you can't really say?
Every company is unique, obviously. The technology has to be different. It has to create something which is quantitatively better than what you see in the market today. The companies, as a rule, are companies that can scale quickly, so they're very high technology. They are companies that we don't look to take these companies into the public markets and grow them to be very big. We look, as a rule, to get them up through the first few phases and then flip them to a larger company who can take them into full commercialization.
Something like Merck would be a good
Something like Merck with a pharmaceutical. We will take drug development from one defined stage into clinical testing, generally get positive results in the first stage of clinical testing, and then that's the point at which the big pharmas get involved. Similar model for devices, et cetera.
Jennifer, can you sort of walk us through what once, let's say you get that great application on the web or wherever it comes from, and you're going to pursue that company because it looks good. What are the steps that company goes through to try to make the case?
Right, so the first step, the first interaction that we have with the entrepreneur is reviewing the written application. So we'll have a group of our members who will sit down and review that along with myself, and we'll dig into the company of the materials that they've provided. And then if they reach the stage and great team and some of the other aspects that we look at a company, we'll invite them to come in and have a first interaction with our members through a screening meeting. So they have 10 minutes to pitch their case to us. We'll have a question and answer, and that's usually about 15 of our members that participate in that meeting. They move forward from there. They go into the general membership meeting where they meet with our 65 members. They give a similar presentation, question and answer, and then we decide if we move into due diligence or not. If we move into due diligence, then we usually work with the company anywhere from 2 to 6 months, depending on how much we need to dig in. And from there, we'll make an investment decision, and then we open it up. All of our members invest individually, so each member makes their own investment
So a huge
decision.
process to get that company to be.
It is. It's a great process, though. We get to learn about the companies and also about the entrepreneurs in the process.
And one thing I should add there is that it is very often the case that one of our members who has special expertise will actually end up working with the company quite closely, either as a board member or as a consultant to the company. And that's one of the real strengths that angel investing groups bring to the companies that they invest in. So you have this deep reservoir of, most of our members are very mature business people. They're in their 50s and 60s. They have tons of experience, and these young companies don't often have access to executives with that kind of skill base. So it's a real strength of the angel investing
Rob,
model.
I'll stick with you. A problem that comes up frequently, not just on this show, but in discussions and around, is access to capital.
Right.
We're always hearing about that as an issue younger companies talk about in Rhode Island specifically. I'm just curious, from your vantage point as part of Cherrystone and your career more generally, how big of a problem do you think the access to capital one is in Rhode Island?
I think there's plenty of capital around for the right investments. I think younger firms often have difficulty in finding their way to the capital, right? They're not necessarily aware of the angel investing groups, and the different capital sources aren't as well linked as they should be. I think there are plenty of models for ways of bringing capital, even much more capital than the angel market has, to bear. And we are going to be engaging in some discussions with the new head of the Rhode Island Commerce Corporation, for example, about ways of doing that. My own view is for early stage opportunities that are put together the right way, there's plenty of capital available.
So it's out there if you do it right, potentially. From your experience, what would be your advice to a young company, Jennifer, that thinks, I have a great idea, I want to be the kind of people, whether with you folks or someone else, to make sure they're ready to get the investment they need?
I think it's finding the right investors at the right time for your company. So when you're early stages and you're just starting out, I think your early investors need to be great advocates for you as well and bring domain expertise. And so I think it's not just about the checkbook when you're reaching out to investors, so I would encourage them throughout your entire fundraising process to find the best partners, not just the best investors.
Anything you'd add to that, Rob?
It's you've got to have a good story. You've got to be able to prove that the technology that you've got is something that's going to be qualitatively better that's out there. And the person who's presenting it has to be an entrepreneur, right? Because we don't just bet the horse, we also bet the jockey. That's a simple way to put it.
Yeah.
We have to see somebody who can coalesce the resources necessary to make an organization work. If we see that, we are very comfortable with it, because all these organizations get going, they do their initial capital raises, and they start moving, and
5 seconds.
and they have to make a pivot.
All right.
And we want the people to be able to pivot.
All right. We'll leave it there. See you next week on Executive Suite.